afternoon. Welcome to a cool, rainy Sunday afternoon in Mildura. When I started reading the stories from Invisible Cities, I thought that our condition would end before the book did. And then when that didn't happen, I decided to read you a Calvinian architecture, believing fully that there'd be a change in our condition before those stories had ended. But that hasn't proved to be so. The book has come and gone and we're still in the same condition. Our future is uncertain. So I've decided to move on to the third book. It's titled The Tertiary World, and it was the basis, both the basis and the blueprint for a series of performances, as well as the recording of what happened through those performances. I'll read you the introduction to the book, A Tertiary World. I have lived most of my life inside a grid, measuring 7 by 7 streets and aligned north-south. Located in the inner suburbs north of Melbourne, its parallel north-south components begin with Carlton's Lygon Street as the grid's most westerly point, and with Collingwood's Smith Street at its most easterly. Its parallel east-west components begin with Brunswick's Park Street on the grid's most northerly point and end with Victoria Street at its most southerly. In order to navigate coherently through the memory of a life lived inside the grid, I've assigned each of the 14 streets that compose it one of 7 spectrum colours. Consequently, the first north-south street I can remember is allotted the colour red, the second orange, the third yellow. The streets running east-west are similarly allotted a colour according to the chronological order my memory imposes. My memory of this life lived in this grid. These are the bones of the grid's memory body, now embedded in architecture, trees, pavement, and the earth below it, and the sky and clouds above it. The first 7 memories that surface along the length of each street are also identified by spectrum colour. The location of the earliest memory is marked red, the next orange, and so on, with the location of the most recently occurring event marked violet. Consequently, the skeletal structure of this memory body is made up of a grid of 14 streets embedded deeply within its flesh. I then begin to walk through the grid in the order mentioned above. As I wander, numberless memories spring forth and emerge, each at its own speed. They sprout forth into the visible world in all their imperfection, carrying with them the primal material that constitutes the memory body's substance. My task is to simply witness the emergence of each memory's fragments without adding or subtracting anything from their shape or texture. In that sense, I walk from location to location, not so much as to remember, but to acknowledge. In this way, I proceed to acknowledge the first 7 memories that emerge from the bones of each of the 14 streets. I record my wandering via a video camera attached to the end of a purpose-built aluminium frame strapped to my chest. It frames my face and all that constantly recedes beyond its contour as I walk through each street. Whatever I witness within each instantly constantly recedes behind me, aggregating once more into a newly reconfigured memory body. I constantly shed each moment as an abandoned memory, and those who will subsequently view the video recording of my wanderings are its only witnesses. We are destined to experience our lives almost entirely through the rear vision mirror of memory, constantly acknowledging and reviewing what we have just left behind. We mistake this reflected view for the lived experience. This then is the tertiary world. It's neither the primary lived experience that only the very few can manage, nor the objectively recounted version. It's rather the uncertainly constructed narrative that emerges as one attempts to crystallize the shadow and fog of the ungrasped now into a passably legible version of what has been left behind. But is there a single self that has been newly constructed or even revealed through the aggregation of memories retrieved from the grid? A self that now defines me more completely than the self I inhabited before my wanderings through the 14 streets? I don't believe so. There are as many selves as there are memories to construct them, and to seek to identify a single self defined through an aggregation of many memories is like attempting to hold and retain the river's water as it flows through one's hands, hoping that the few drops left in one's palm can tell us something definitive about the river's essence. I don't understand much of what I have described in this book, or even how each part fits into a coherent whole, if indeed such geometry exists. I simply aim to share some of these discoveries, irrelevant as they may be, because it's not so much their content that I want to offer you, but the impetus of the sharing itself. It's the only antidote, this seemingly mindless doing, to the silent desperation that the fragmented lived life constantly shrouds us with. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share with you the evidence arising from my ongoing commitment to describe what is, and in so doing I offer you my account of the tertiary world. And this was written in 2008. This book contains both an image taken from the video camera of each of the locations along the 14 streets, as well as the remembered narratives of what each memory consists of. What makes me want to read to you these stories? It's a little of what I've said in the introduction. It's the impetus to share such seemingly irrelevant fragments of memory as a kind of antidote to the division and the isolation that we all feel. These stories that I've read over the last few months have kind of anchored my days, and I missed the reading, so there's a selfish dimension, definitely, to my offering you these stories. They're memories of my early life in Melbourne from the age of 9, my first memories along each street, until, of course, I was much, much older, because I continued living in this grid for most of my life. Over the next few days, I'll share these stories with you. My very best to you until tomorrow.